My man Czar make tracks like this.
What's going on, y'all? So this video is going to be a small rant. I want to show you 3 things that really annoy me in Pro Tools. So as you know, I've been using Studio One for the past many years for all my mixing, mastering. The underground studio here in Nashville, I've been tracking a lot of my vocals at, and I've installed Studio One at that studio, so I track there. So I haven't been in Pro Tools in a few years, and unless to move a session from Pro Tools to Studio One, but I haven't done any tracking or mixing in Pro Tools in a while. And this weekend I had a vocal session at another studio where I used Pro Tools, and after using Studio One for the last few years, I want to show you 3 things that I noticed that really bugged me. This isn't a diss or hate video towards Pro Tools, but these are just 3 things that I noticed that I'll say previously didn't bother me, but after using Studio One, these things bother me now. The first thing is, we had some issues getting sound to come out of the monitors, and it made me realize how when you look into the I/O setup in Pro Tools, you don't have metering showing you where sound is coming from what outputs. This would have been really handy in our troubleshooting. And once I go through these 3 things, I'll jump into Studio One to show you that this is not an issue in Studio One. But there's no metering here in the input and output settings, which is really helpful for troubleshooting. And speaking of no metering, the studio uses an OG Apogee Ensemble and a Digi 03 rack, 003. Let's look at the front of the 003 here. There's no metering, so you have no way to tell if you're getting any signal in or out of it. Just a small thing I noticed. A lot of interfaces now have the metering, and it's so helpful for troubleshooting because when you're not getting sound from somewhere, you have to track down your signal flow and determine what is sound coming into and what is sound not coming out of. Where's my signal flow stopping it with the signal? Because we had meters going on the console, so I knew sound was getting to the console. But it would have really helped to have an interface that had metering on it, which the 003 doesn't. Just something to point out. But back to Pro Tools. So no metering on the input and output. The second thing I noticed is in selecting output. So let's go back to my input output settings. So you see I have 8 outputs selected, 4 stereo pairs. So why is it when I look here, I get this huge list of inputs and outputs? And I've always known Pro Tools to do this, and it's just very annoying to me. If I have 8 outputs active, why not show me 8 outputs? All of this path inactive, path inactive. Well, if it's inactive, I don't want to see it. So that's the first thing. Oh no, that's the second thing. So the third thing, I'm going to jump to the mixer. The third thing is when I move a plugin during playback, it pauses the playback for a second. This was really annoying because I wanted to throw some plugins up and do some things while during playback, while allowing the artist to rehearse and go over what he needed to, and I can't do that with playback pausing every time I move a plugin. So here's an example of that. Yeah, so imagine you're trying to rehearse during playback and that keeps happening. It's not good at all. Those are the 3 things that, like I said, really annoyed me when I was using Pro Tools this weekend. If there's ways around this, please, please, please comment and let me know. But let's jump into Studio One just so I can show that this is not an issue there. Okay, so we're in Studio One now, and I just want to say before I forget, so that session was tracked in Pro Tools HD, Pro Tools 10 HD, and then my version that I have is Pro Tools 11 native. I don't know if any of these things have been fixed in Pro Tools 12. I have no idea what's added in 12. So if this doesn't exist in 12, again, please let me know. But I am in Studio One, and so the first thing was the long list of inactive outputs. So, if I look at my outputs, these are all the outputs I have in Studio One, and if we look at my I/O setup, there's all my outputs. Now, if I remove everything except for my first two outputs, and I apply, go to my output. Oh, I've only have one output, the only one that I have active. Just makes sense. Again, I don't know why Pro Tools leaves that long list of options there in the outputs. Second thing was moving the plug-in from track to track during playback and experiencing a pause. So here's an example of that in Studio One where that doesn't happen. So you can see I can manipulate plugins and move plugins around in Studio One without it interrupting playback. So I think I've done this out of order now. The last thing was, now I'm trying to remember. Oh, the metering in the input and output section. So I'm going to start playback again, and we look at the I/O. You can see the metering. You can see the metering playing there. I'll do it again and just watch where my mouse is. You can see that there's metering in the I/O settings showing that there's output coming out of those outputs, and it works the same way with the inputs. So, during this is really helpful during troubleshooting, because if I don't have the right output selected, at least I can see where signal is coming out of. Once again, I'll hit play and go back to the I/O settings. You can see the metering happening in the I/O settings. Again, very helpful for troubleshooting. So, like I said, I don't, take this, oh, he's a Pro Tools hater. Like I said, this is just three things that I noticed that annoyed me when using Pro Tools this weekend during a tracking session that, like I said, previously hadn't annoyed me before. All right. Like I said, anyone knows a way to fix these, let me know, comment, and I'll catch y'all next time.